Your height decides how many rivals you have, not how you look. How many rivals? Scientists counted them. Every inch got a number. Yours is not the number you'd guess. 5 feet 6 inches and under, the long haul. If you're 5'6" or under, you know the routine. You've sized yourself up against every guy in the room. You've picked the back row in photos on purpose. And yes, somebody got paid to study this. Science finally showed up for you. Here's what they found. Your relationships last longer than almost anyone's. It starts with 174 speed dating nights across North America. People paid their own money to be there, so nobody was faking it. Everyone met everyone, 3 minutes each, then ticked yes or no on a card. Almost 6,000 people, 128,000 decisions. Women said yes to about 30% of the men. Men said yes to about 47% of the women. 2 out of every 3 guys got turned down. That's the room they walked into. Then the researchers counted something nobody thinks to count. Every woman there had written down the shortest and the tallest man she'd accept. That lets you work out how many other men each guy was competing with. At 5'6", about 3.5 rivals for every woman who'd have him. At 5'4", more than 8. At 5'2", over 12. 12 men, 1 woman deciding. And missing her range in the 2 directions is not the same. Say a woman wants a man between 5'10" and 6'2". One walks up 2 inches too short, another 2 inches too tall. She turns down the short one far more often. Too short is a bigger problem than too tall. Then a different team followed thousands of American families for decades. Men under 5'7" got married 18% less often than average height men. That's the cost. But those marriages held. Once short men married, they separated less often than anybody else. Why? The researchers found the pattern. They didn't claim to prove the cause. But one thing stood out. Short men married later, usually not by choice. It just took longer. The crowd made them wait. The researchers think that wait is part of why the marriages lasted. There's a second difference nobody has explained. Short men often married a woman close to their own height. A few married women taller than them. That almost never happened to the tall men. Short men have the hardest time getting started, and the best odds of it lasting. How fast does that crowd shrink? Add 1 inch, then another. 5 feet 7 inches to 5 feet 9 inches, the dark horse. 5'9" is dead average for American men. Half are taller, half are shorter. And more men land in these 3 inches than anywhere else. If that's you, nobody has ever described you by your height. You're just a guy. It pays off in a way nobody talks about. You have more children than anyone else on this list. Start with the speed dating rooms, because the numbers move fast here. At 5'7", a man faced a little over 2 rivals for every woman open to him. At 5'8", about 1.5. At 5'9", just under 1.25. 3 inches up from the last group, and the number is down by 2/3. Then the researchers found something they weren't looking for. The women kept saying yes to men much taller than themselves. So the tallest men in the room got claimed first. That left the average height men matched with the shorter women. Not because anyone picked that, because of who got taken already. Now, the part that matters. A team in Wisconsin followed more than 3,500 men into their 60s until they were done having children. Then they counted. Average height men had the most. More than the short men. More than the tall men. Money and education didn't explain it. The pattern held. The researchers had a guess. Average height men married younger than the men at either end. More years married, starting earlier. Which is strange. Next to that speed dating room. The men who got the most attention there are not the men who ended up with the most children. Something happens between the card and the rest of your life. Hold on to that. There is a cost here. And it's a quiet one. Nothing about being average gets noticed. No woman crosses a room because a man is 5'8". This advantage only turns up in numbers collected over decades, which is a terrible way to feel good about yourself on a Friday night. The rival count is still dropping. 1 more inch and it goes below 1. Below 1 means more women were open to him than there were men chasing them. And a 5 feet 10 inches to 5 feet 11 inches, the first refusal. At 5'10", you're taller than most men in the country. Not by much. Nobody has ever called you tall. But something flips here that nobody notices. For men in these 2 inches, the rivals finally drop below 1. At 5'10", about 0.85. At 5'11", 0.75. Under 1. First time that happens to anybody. The payoff is simple. These are the first men on the list who aren't fighting for a spot. They're picking one. That sounds small. It isn't. Every man shorter than them walked into that room against a line of other men. They walk into the same room and the line isn't there. The researchers watched what men did with that. They tracked how often each man said yes across a whole night. Shorter men said yes to more women. Taller men said yes to fewer. And the drop-off started right around 5'11". This is roughly where men got choosy. The researchers were careful about what that means. It's what men did in one room on one night. It isn't a personality. A man who gets turned down all evening starts saying yes to more people. A man who doesn't get turned down has no reason to. Behavior follows the odds. It isn't who they are. There's a trade here, and it already happened without them noticing. Go back to Wisconsin. The men with the most children were 5'7" to 5'9". 2 or 3 inches above that, and the number of children is already falling. Somewhere in the last 3 inches, attention started going up and children started going down. Both are real. They point opposite ways. Nobody has explained that gap cleanly. The Wisconsin team ruled out money and education. They couldn't rule out much else. This is the last stretch where a man gives up almost nothing and gains a lot. Any guy would take that deal. The next inch is the lowest the number ever goes. That's the best the dating side ever gets. 6 feet 0 inches to 6 feet 2 inches. The headliner. If that's you, you already know it's the number people mention. It turns out they're right, and not for the reason anyone thinks. 6 feet isn't close to the tallest, but across every height these researchers measured, this is where a man has the fewest rivals of anyone in the room, 0.71, lowest figure anywhere in the study, and it stays low. 6'1", 0.74, 6'2", 0.77. Women in those rooms said yes to these men more than to anyone else there, and the peak landed around 6'2". Most wanted, fewest rivals, both at once. They also got the most matches. More cards came back with 2 yeses on them for these men than for any other height. Now watch what they did with it. That drop-off in men saying yes? By 6 feet, it's at the bottom. These were the least responsive men in the entire study. They turned down more people than anybody. The men everyone wanted were the men saying no. The researchers didn't call that arrogance, and neither should you. They pointed at the obvious cause. When almost nobody rejects you, you can afford to be picky. Flip the odds and the behavior flips with them. So what does it cost? Back to those American families followed for decades. Tall men married sooner than anybody. Then they divorced more. Short men's marriages held. These didn't hold at the same rate. Quick to start, quicker to end. There's a second thing in that data, and it's good news. Tall men who hadn't married by 30 caught up. After 30, their chances of marrying climbed past average height men. The early rush wasn't the whole story. Nobody has settled why. Marrying young explains part of it. The rest is open. And here's the last thing worth knowing before we go higher. At 6 feet, 0.71. At 6'2", 0.77. 6 feet 3 inches and over. The long shadow. If you're 6'3" or taller, you've spent your whole life being told you won the lottery. So here's the number nobody has ever shown you. At 6'3", 0.89 rivals. 6'4", 1.04. 6'5", 1.32. 6'6", 1.74. 6'7", over 2. A 6'7" man faces more competition than a 5'8" man does. Read that again. Everything up to now pointed one way. Taller, thinner crowd. It held the whole way up, 10 inches of it. Then it stopped at 6 feet, and after that it ran backwards. The crowd shrinks. Then it grows back. 6 feet is the bottom. These men still win the first meeting. That part is completely real, and it holds all the way up. In a room full of strangers, nothing beats them. So why does the crowd come back? Because of what those women wrote on their cards. Each one gave a shortest and a tallest. The tallest mattered. The higher a man went, the more women had already ruled him out before he opened his mouth. It shows up in real couples too, and not just here. Researchers in Britain went through thousands of households and measured the gap between partners. Not how tall the man was, how much taller he was than her. Couples where he had about 10 inches or more on her showed up less often than you'd get by pairing people at random. Not rare, just rarer than chance. The household data agrees with the cards. Men over 6'2" married 9% less often than average height men. Put that next to the shortest men. Under 5'7", 18% less. Over 6'2", 9% less. Both ends pay. One end pays double. Nobody has a clean answer for why the ceiling exists. What is clear is that one preference does both jobs. The thing that lifted these men above every other group is the thing that eventually shuts them out, which leaves one question. If both ends lose, and the room crowns 6 feet while the family data crowns 5'9", who actually wins? Not one man in this video. One last number, and it's the strangest one. Women said yes most often when a man was about 10 inches taller. Men said yes most often when a woman was 3 inches shorter. Real couples landed at 7.5. Not what she wanted, not what he wanted. Everyone chose freely, and almost nobody got what they came for. And this only holds here. Researchers ran the same test on Hadza foragers in Tanzania and farming families in the Gambia. No male taller rule at all. Same species. Different world. The room crowns 6 feet. The families crown 5'9". Both are real, and they don't agree. So, no height wins. Short men wait longest and stay married longest. Average men go unnoticed and have the most children. 6-footers own the room. The tallest hit a ceiling nobody warned them about. Your height handed you a set of trades before you were born. Which one would you take? Drop your height below and tell me if your number matched your life. I am Noah, and I'll see you in the next video.